Hi students at Colorado School of Mines, my name is Hannah Cupples. Welcome to my home. Today we're making Kopytka and Gulasz with local potatoes and onions. So Kopytka is basically the Polish version of gnocchi. I'm gonna start by boiling them in some salt water. And while that's happening, we can cut our vegetables. So this is gonna be for the goulash sauce. And basically, we're just gonna cut long, thin strips of everything. And that way you get those long vegetable strands that kind of stick to the individual dumplings. And they don't have to be perfect or anything because they're going to be cooked down pretty far. So I've been cooking in Colorado for about 10 years. I was the chef of Four by Brother Luck for about 2.5 years, and then since then I've kind of been doing my own thing. Doing consulting with restaurants, private chefing, meal prep, that kind of stuff. Oil's nice and hot, so we're just going to go ahead and throw our onions and peppers in. Using local ingredients is really important because it stimulates your local economy. It's the place that you live in. You want to support the people around you. But eating locally is also really important because the food has less ways to travel. So you can get an onion, say, from Strohara Farms, and that's a 15-20 minute drive from here. My main goal as a chef is basically just to get people excited, because I want to get people back to appreciating ingredients for what they have to offer instead of trying to change them. You know, when you have something like local potatoes, local onions, they often taste better too because they're smaller scale, they're people that spend more time with the food. So I want this potato to taste like the potato. I want the onions to taste like the onions because that's showcasing what that ingredient has to offer in its truest form. I like using smoked paprika because it just adds a little bit extra flavor. You don't need a whole lot. I like a whole lot. Now that that's all mixed, we're just gonna leave the onions alone for a couple seconds. We'll start to smell it getting a little bit toasty, and then that's when we're gonna deglaze with a little bit of liquid to lift it off the surface of the pan. And as soon as it reduces down and gets kind of pasty again, we'll add a little bit more. So if these are cooked perfectly, you should be able to pinch it and the skin comes right off of it, just like that. If they're a little bit more difficult than that, you can also take like a butter knife and kind of score one edge, and then it should just peel right off. All right, so potatoes are all peeled. They're out of their skins. A little bit doesn't matter. It can just kind of add to the character of the dough and a little bit more flavor. So we're just gonna go through and mash these. And you can take your time with it. You don't have to go wild, but we just wanna make sure that there's no big lumps left. They don't have to be perfectly smooth. If you have a ricer, now would be a good time to use it. I'm a chef and I don't have a ricer, so I don't expect that most people do. We're just gonna break up the egg. This is like where I like to switch to a spatula. And we'll just start adding a little bit of flour, about a half a cup at a time. You don't want to add it all at once because it can create little dry pockets in the dough that you might miss if you're mixing too quickly. So I like to add it in sections. You also don't want to add it too sparingly because you want to make sure you're not overworking the dough. I'm going to flip the dough and mash it with the side of my hand. And you'll notice that a lot of that liquid comes out almost immediately. So you can tell that you're definitely going to need more or that you're pretty close. Just give it a better gauge with your hands. We're gonna want this dough to still be moist, but not sticky. So it shouldn't stick to your hands or the bowl once we've added enough flour. Have a little additional flour in the bottom of the bowl just to make sure that it picks up anything that it needs to. And it'll kind of just leave any flour behind that it doesn't need. Once it seems like it's not picking up any more flour, I'll move it onto a countertop or a cutting board if you have one. And just continue kneading it until you don't see any more of the dusty whiteness. And again, you just don't want it to stick to the countertop of your hands. So we can see this is nice and elastic, nice and firm. Not sticking to anything. When I press it, the dough starts to rise up from my finger pin a little bit. It'll happen more once we rest it. Put it in a container with a little bit of flour, and then we'll just put this in the fridge for about an hour. So this is the dough after it's been rested for a couple hours. You can see when I press on it, it springs back a little bit. A generous amount of flour to roll these out. Because they're so soft, they do get kind of sticky. And just cut a little piece off. And it just needs to be small and manageable, so I like to go like about 2 ounces at a time. Make sure your surface is nice and floured, and then we're just gonna roll it out. So I typically go about a thumb width. And then for shaping, you start at one end, hold your knife at a diagonal, and just chop. And again, they don't have to be perfect. They're going in stew. Kopytka means hoof in Polish, so it's meant that they look like horse hooves. So these are nice and coated in flour, and that's a big part. The dough is pretty soft, so they'll stick together if they're not absolutely covered in flour. Now that these are all kind of floating to the top, that's when you know that they're done. My name is Hannah Cupples, and we just made Kopytka and Gulasz.